Hey everybody, it's Bo Fiegel, strongest lawyer in Texas. A couple weeks ago, I had the privilege of filming a podcast with licensed professional counselor Rochelle Melion. About 30, 45 minutes of our podcast we cut out because it delved into matters of religion, preference for religion, and kind of the state of religion with related to our current politics. I know that content isn't for everyone, so if that's something you don't want to listen to, you absolutely can skip that. But if it's something you're interested in, we're happy to post it now in a special bonus episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please continue to subscribe for every episode. Stay strong and go Tigers. All right, we are back. So you're an ordained minister. What is your educational background in that area?
Well, I have taken classes, but I don't have a degree in the faith base, but I do have my life experience. Again, I believe, according to what the Bible tells us, that we are called to be a royal priesthood, to believe therefore and teach all nations.
Yeah.
I grew up in the church, always just had a space there that I came to be a believer through, trying God by His Word and letting the Scripture lead me and comfort me. And,
So again, this isn't to limit to labels, but you identify as Christian, the Christian Bible. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Do you have a denomination you identify with?
I grew up Baptist.
Okay.
Dad was a Baptist preacher.
Same.
Right? So, and then move away from that to more non-denominational.
Okay.
Part of my first stint, when I think back to what led me into therapy, was I had sleep problems when I was about 10, 12 years old. So I would have these dreams. My dad's from Louisiana, so they were, but in this particular household and family culture, it was okay to talk about dreams in the prophetic space and what, demonic entities are at play, maybe or maybe not, but it wasn't necessarily talked about in the Black Baptist church, right? It was just kind of, in our house we could talk about dreams kind of a space. But, one night I used, the word in the 23rd Psalms and just, there was a peace that came over me that night. So that led me to study dreams more, and I wanted to be a psychoanalyst.
Wow.
But Freud didn't have the answers, right? But it definitely led me on the path there of why I even fell into counseling, was that space. But God was always there with me in that space. And then fast forward to college, and then coming out of college, and I had a degree in psychology, but I went into the field work of CPS, and I ended up being a teacher and called into a faith-based program. I was doing one-on-one tutoring at a space outside of San Antonio near Fort Worth, and that assignment, coming back to Texas, was through a young boy with autism. And on the way out of San Antonio, I got a vision of one of my students with the most severe case of autism that I had worked with. So when I was just praying to God, like, why of all the students that I've ever worked with, you're showing me this nonverbal boy rocking, right? That's the vision you showed me. And then on the way back, circling back, leading me into this space. This one particular student had a science project, and when you work with certain students, that they have to, they would be best handled by teaching them the same way. So I wanted to meet with this math teacher to learn how he was being taught math on this particular concept. And that's when I fell in love with this campus. I put out my resume, and he called me back months later and said, Miss Rochelle, we don't have a class, but we need you to come back in. We've been praying over hiring you. And one day the same principal came in. I'm getting set up for the school year and gets excited to tell me that, they didn't want to tell me, but they didn't have a classroom for me. That they hired me because God said so. And then the students came and they had to hire another teacher because we were in surplus in that classroom. So just to say that in that space, through that door, that one child opened the door to this campus. Then I would later learn that they were believers, that we're ministers first, teachers second. So that's when I got the other kind of more apostolic ground zero work than the work that I grew up with, and kind of leading me into what it does mean to truly minister right outside the walls of the church and in the marketplace and working with people. And then my walk with ordained minister at my local church, right? That's another story, right? If I were to keep going there, but it's just graduated over time that I didn't seek it.
Yeah.
It came to me.
What do you? Yeah, I grew up extremely evangelical, neocon, right wing Baptist, like every piece of it. And I tend not to be particularly passive when I'm into something. I'll be full bore, you know. Sorry, love, obsessed with you. She gets annoyed, clingy as hell in our marriage. You know, strong man. I'm obviously. Is that me?
No, it's me. It's reminding me that I have to change it later today.
Oh, that's funny. You know, obviously full bore, and then in faith and there, and which bled into politics. You know, it was pretty one notion. And so when I was in high school, I thought I was being called to be minister. We took a trip as a church, like a youth group, to Liberty University in Tennessee, run
Nice
by
school.
then Jerry Falwell, host of the DC Talk Kids that had a group later. Anyway, I went back senior year, and LSU offered me a full scholarship, and I'm like, well, I mean, like, this is kind of sorry. And so, but I still thought I was going to be a minister, and so I took Hebrew under a rabbi for 2 years, and then another year with a different teacher there. I took biblical Greek, which is a different Greek than modern and ancient. You know, studied, and then that turned into me going to law school. But what I struggle with, and I would like to be enlightened, and the purpose of this conversation for me, and maybe we cut the whole thing, but the purpose of the conversation for me is a couple areas I'm interested in, and actually, you're the perfect candidate here because you're an academic, you're smart, like not just like haha you're smart. No, you're studied. You approach the world through, you know, academia, which I think is, and experiential. You do both. But, you know, even in your book, the way you said, like this came less through degrees and more through calling, more through there. Number one, when we study what we'll call the scriptures, the 66 book of the Christian Bible. By the way, Catholics have, 6 or 8 more books? They do. And there's a lot more to what goes into that, how it was formed, than people want to admit. God did not come with his hands and write, even in the most directive traditions. That's not me disrespecting it. That's the reality. Which leads me to, there's a lot of history, a lot of study, a lot of academia that's gone into study in the scriptures that we call the Torah, the Old Testament, New Testament, the Bible, and even if you want to add the Apocrypha for the Catholics. I feel like that's often ignored and substituted for inspiration, and I'm not going to lie, I struggle not to take that as laziness. Stab me straight a little bit. You know what I mean? Like that's where I struggle. I mean, you know, and I don't. There was a time I was younger. I was arrogant. I'm smarter than you, not you, but I'm smarter than the person talking to me. And the Bible doesn't even mean what you just said. You know, Jehovah's not a real word. I didn't know that till I went to college. And like I'm hearing a pastor scream Jehovah Jireh. It turns out it's not a freaking word, man. And like it starts to bother me. And I won't lie. I let myself get bogged down in some of these details that I'm losing my relationship with on the spiritual side and Creator. Maybe those details don't matter, but I won't lie. There's a world where I struggle with the lack of academic approach when you're studying the scripture, and the lack of separation of the spirituality, which I think we'll get into a lot more. But set me straight in the academic part. Like I feel like I'm wrong, but I get mad. I won't lie.
I if I'm hearing you correctly, it's this wrestling that because you are studied. I didn't know all that about you. I always said, "Oh, you are a minister, right?" So I know that by spirit, light sees light, right? So the idea that there are different levels, that there are other denominations or religions even that do a better job even at ensuring that the body is a study of what it is that they profess to believe. In my work in counseling, I believe is probably the most opportunity that I've had with running across the space with either atheists or strong believers as well, where, what? I put this delicately, right? I tend to draw people that are at the top of their fields, very smart people,
Mhm.
right? So when we get into these spaces, and they may have had a history with all this knowledge, I use a term that I grabbed from a local pastor was describing what's called, he termed as the God complex, that you can get so caught up in who you are or what you know that it can become another space or prayer point to stay humble, right?
Mhm.
So if you're always the smartest person in the room, you know, is that ego. Think of in the Bible, think of the Pharisees, you know, that Pharisaic spirit that you can't stop for, you know, a person in need because that's beneath you, or because you think you know better than Jesus, so I'm going to catch Jesus, right?
Mhm.
And breaking the law, so because we want to feel better about ourselves. So just thinking that every level that we go up, there's an opportunity to go lower through the door of humility, and that might take more the higher we go to continue to go low to reach the least, the lost, and the left out in the world.
The fear I have among many, let's be honest. The lazy thing that people say is like, religion's responsible for most atrocities, right? She took me to visit Salem, and it really had an impact. I did the whole tattoo from the witch trials. And what was that? That was Puritanism run amok. It was, we have a strict belief in our version and of how we interpret these scriptures, and pause, because you don't have to. The Talmud's been around quite a while. The Matthew Henry wasn't around then, but he's been around now. We don't have to guess the context. I know there's a lot of academic, we don't know everything, but we have the archaeology from there. We know the economic state of these places. We know the timeline and history. This isn't to pick on her, but she grew up in church her whole life and didn't know half the things you would think, and that's not a shot at her. That's like, it wasn't taught, man. I'm going to church and screaming. Go ahead.
My problem was that I have ADHD, and if I don't almost instantly grasp what you're speaking on,
Screw this.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the room still, but this, it's off.
Yeah.
So that was always my problem.
But we know that the 10 tribes were dispersed, the diaspora, by Assyria. We know that. We don't have to guess. The other one's saying Babylon. Hebrew, ancient Hebrew is not the actual language. And it comes to, so why does it matter? Who cares? This is academic, right? The spiritual is supposed to be a connection. I will tell people, my spirituality reawakened when I went to AA, when I was struggling in substance. That's where I finally found it.
Come on.
Yeah, that's where, I don't care if you're, the ditch digger, the homeless kid, the academic, or the elite, the rich, the poor, we're all the same in that room. And that's where I finally felt the most. I was Christian the whole time. That didn't stop the belief, but the finally experience of the full desperation. I need the higher power. I need the help. That's what faith is. I get it. Pause. Go back to church.
Yes,
there.
Yes.
That's not my experience in a lot of churches, and that's not fair. I'm projecting on every church because I had my own bad experiences. But what does it lead to? It leads to this. Mm-hmm. That's what scares me. That's what bothers me. This Puritanism or this isolationism, this bogged down in. I'll just get to it. I've got my opinions on abortion, what the Bible says about it. Here's what I know though. It ain't the central focus. It ain't the theme. It's not a requisite for heaven. It's a complex, difficult women's rights issue, human rights issue, legal, political mess of an issue, and it's not the defining part of. It should not be the defining part of anybody's faith. But what do? They misquote a part of Jeremiah that says, "I knew you in the womb," which is part of a poem, and say that means God. Shut up! It infuriates me, and I struggle because I'm like, if you guys took a little more time to study and read and learn more of the academics, you might get out of yourself on how arrogant you think. Does that make sense where I'm at? That's where I get just lost in it. Yeah. Anyway, that's mine. Yeah.
No, it is a fine line with being hearers and then hearers and doers, and then what does that look like when you put down religion and pick up relationship, and what we're called to do, because we as Christians can be lazy with not studying what it is we profess to believe in and how we're studying it, right? and so, going back with the Hebrew traditions and how it was for, the day of Jesus and as he walked the earth and what that means. Now, as far as the passages versus scriptures taken out of context, but to the space of, as it relates to that beautiful tattoo there, right? The not so beautiful time in our history, and I think to what I know of, right, my people's history, if you will, when it comes to how we're grappling with that even to this day. So if I'm going back to my roots and it's this white Jesus and just doing this to suppress us, going into that whole space of we're not throwing out a whole religion based off of man's interpretation of what
Fair.
it meant for to them and what they did with it in that time.
I have a book in my house that I got. There's like a library was closing from the 1960s called Segregation in the Bible, and it was isolating parts of the Bible to justify, because they're fighting against integration and Civil Rights Act at the time, and you're just like losing it. Slavery sanctioned. It's this. I mean, it feels obvious when I talk about it. Like if the focus is on a spiritual relationship with your Creator, with your higher power, with God, with Jesus, I'll identify it. These problems tend to go away because I don't think it's not. I don't think it's that hard when that's the focus. My connection, that's it. But when you bog down and trying to read, and again, I get mean about it. I won't lie. Bubba Pastor wants to tell me with and doesn't know it wasn't Hebrew and Greek, much less the context, and then take a verse. Bro, just stop. You lost me a minute ago.
Your oil, though, is precious, and it's not for naught, right? So if you're noticing this and are frustrated by it, I just challenge you to do what God's telling you to do with that.
That's fair.
And here we are, right?
Because and I don't want to be in a political space, but to a more patriotic space. One of the beautiful things is you get to be the faith you want here. We get to be Christians in a place like this. That historically is not always true. Again, you don't have to look. Well, go ahead if you were like in Britain. They were all Christian under the banner of Christianity, but when it changed from Catholic to Anglican to Church of England to there, people died. Like we're not there. The Puritans, the Pilgrims, come here from religious persecution. That's a real thing. The Spanish Inquisition wasn't that long before that, where they were seeking out, all that. Like this is historically, we're not very good with this. The mix of political power with the religious fervor should terrify people. And we're only Christian here today because we get the freedom. And it boggles my mind that there are portions of our populace that want to impose their I'll say perceived Christian values, even if they're purely Christian, as law. And I'm like, did you just never pick up a history book? Like, again, I got one right here. Here's what happens is you kill people that aren't witches and 20 people are dead. How many people did the Spanish Inquisition kill? How many people in England are killed? How many people did Constantine kill when he decided that they were, this isn't new. Again, you don't have to be a dork in history. Watch a movie. Like, we know these things. Like, and how bogged down. I mean, she has a person in her life that she had to sever a relationship with over, like, this gentleman's interpretation of the Bible. I'm like, bro, you don't have the qualifications. Here's what I know. I know the Bible says, take care of widows, take care of the poor, take care of the homeless. I know to focus on yourself and your own sins and your own needs. I know that I'm spiritually sick most of the time and I need to have my connection. That's all we need. And again, I don't want to reduce it. You should be able to study. And I think there's a place and time for high-minded discussion of what the Bible says, what it means. Maybe I'm wrong on abortion. I personally think the choice should be there. I really do. But maybe I'm wrong, and I'm open to that conversation. What I'm not okay with is telling a 14-year-old who was raped, who made the hardest decision of her life that's going to affect her and be in your office the rest of her life, that she's a sinner and a whore and going to hell. I don't need the Bible to tell me that's wrong. That's and that's the tenor I get. So now my tone comes down. And get it. It hurts because honestly I'm scared to tell people I'm Christian because of the way it's represented. I'm literally like, I don't want to identify as one because I feel like I might as well say I'm a MAGA. Like, and that's not fair. So that's the struggle. But I like to hear like it's the spiritual relationship first and foremost, and for me, almost the desperation. I never felt it till I was helpless against substance. Like that was it. Until I knew I had no way out, and that's the first time I was like, this isn't cultural, this isn't academic, this isn't mental. I desperately need to follow a plan. I don't know. And for me, they were 12 steps, and which are spiritually based. The guys that wrote the AA, the big book, the blue book, like they were Christian unapologetically. They keep it
And the language.
secular-ish, not secular. They keep it vague. They keep it non. It's not specifically Christian, but they're not ashamed of saying it either. So yeah, that's where I struggle with it generally.
So, you and I, we went to the funeral a few days ago or yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and since Kyle has passed, my late husband has passed. I've had people coming up to me and saying, don't let this make you angry at God. Don't let this. And I have truly, what I feel like, been honest with myself. I'm not mad at God. I'm mad at him. The circumstances around his death, the amount of times that he had to turn these behaviors around. Yesterday, it dawned on me. Because the man was up there speaking and said what so many people do when someone passes. He's in a better place. This is part of God's plan. And I really struggle with that being said. How dare you? He's better off up there away from his wife and his kids, young kids that need him still. He's better. So it took some of that for me to actually be able to be honest with myself and say, you know what? Maybe I am a little upset with God. All this time, these 2 years, I have been thinking I'm mad at Kyle. I'm also mad at God. I've got to work through that. But
That's relationship.
yeah. So
You get the opportunity to be honest
Mhm.
with your maker about how you feel.
yeah.
I agree. But I don't think what helps is technically heaven's better. Technically this is temporal and that's eternity, so it should
Yeah.
just be okay.
Yeah, and speaking of license and grief work, we're trained to be sensitive to that. But in the church, and for some people, like you said, that is what brings them comfort. But this clinician would
I'm so glad to hear
definitely,
you say that.
right, not be the one to say so and so's in a better place, or I know how you're feeling, because that can be insensitive. So we just adopt it as don't even
Go there.
go there.
I was floored. First of all, the service was beautiful, and this gentleman, I don't want named, but he was a father of two, a 16-year-old girl who's an avid sports player in her high school, and then a young boy who I don't remember the condition, but a disability that will carry forever. He'll be at home forever, like nonverbal of some variety. Every account, the place was filled to the brim, standing room only. You never know, but what you can observe was loving husband, loving father, worked at the same company for 2 decades.
18 years.
Just lived life appropriately. Just every picture, just hundreds of pictures going by with a smile at his kids' sporting events, at this. I mean, I honestly felt like guilty about, am I in my kid's life enough as I'm sitting through there? Like, I mean, that's where my head went. And then, so they're doing the appropriate eulogies. But then one person stands up and it's like, well, we went to his bedside and he professed his faith in God then. And we know he's saved. And I'm like, I don't question the path to salvation. I'm good there. But like, it felt so reductive and diminishing of what we really saw. For people who salvation cry, I believe that. But read James too. James says, you'll show by the works. Now, I don't know mechanically this man's salvation or path. But here's what I know. He was a good guy objectively before or after. I almost don't know that it has its place in my ether, in my interest to hear that, okay, cool, you prayed with him and he said the right sinner's prayer on the deathbed. Like, that's all we reduce it to? Because I'm looking at two beautiful kids and a widow and a flood of people whose lives he touched with goodness and love. And again, I'm not trying to substitute works for, but something's wrong with that picture. If your faith is so isolated to that, I struggle with something's missing. I can't articulate it. I haven't studied it enough, but and I'm not saying the guy on the cross didn't get saved, that's not important. Those moments don't matter, but I sure struggle with, like, I don't think that needed to be said right there. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. It hits me in a way I struggle with. I don't know what else to say.
And then, like I said, for the family in that seat, it may have been what comforted them in that moment.
And
right?
if that's there,
Right?
absolutely what they needed. That's fine.
And I can't say that I won't be aligned with someone where I say it and that's exactly what they need, or a grieving mother,
Right.
who's been there, being
Yeah.
able to be there for another grieving mother. The Bible says, bear one another's burdens, right? But we're not going to be the mind of God to always understand why. But
Mm-hmm.
why? And I won't necessarily be healed either from my grief.
Yeah.
Because it's not a pathology. It's post the fall, the cycle of life, and where we all have to contend with, and whether how we go or when we go, it's not necessarily up to us. But there are no words to take away pain.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a more positive note. Where would you, in my opinion only, the best expression of faith, the best expression of our faith, and the cleanest, preaching has its place, witnessing has its place, but to me the cleanest is when we're in soup kitchens, when we're charitable, and I don't just mean rich guys writing a check, I mean charitable with time, when we're forgiving. In my opinion, strong opinion, that's the expression of the faith that means the most. The quieter voices tend to heal. And again, I'll tell you, like the people that changed my life the most were in rooms of AA, and Jesus was never mentioned, but that's what brought me closer to the faith than anything else.
And that's what I meant earlier about not always having to Bible beat people over the
Yeah.
head. You walk it out, and God will show you those opportunities, or maybe it won't be you. Maybe you just planted the seed, and somebody else is watering the seed. And in the space of the political, go with you a little bit here, to the idea that I'm just going to say, right? Been offered opportunities to speak in podcasts before, but this is the first time that I've said yes. So it's just moving where God's leading me in life to just start speaking on some things that we get the opportunity to speak now. And the quieter voices maybe haven't as much. But to say this, that I believe, right, that Christianity has been taken hostage by one group. And so now, it does become a space where it's not popular anymore, or it's only popular if you're, red and not blue.
Yeah.
And then, you could argue the same for the other side. So evil on both sides, whatever, however you want to put that, but don't put me in a category or my God in a box
Yeah.
for your political talking points, abortion, same sex. Oh, but what about the foreigner, right? That we're leaving out.
Right.
Healthcare, Jesus, did he ask for your insurance card before he healed you? Like there are some principles of kingdom mindset that are not being talked about. And if we all care, like we say that we care about doing the work of Jesus Christ as believers, then why are we not having louder conversations that bridge people together instead of continuing to separate and divide?
My theory, right? My theory is, and because I grew up with it, is there's a significant percentage, I'd be hesitant to put it, of people that are proclaimed Christians and I kind of use the term like culturally Christianity. Like that's how they grew up. It's a safe existence for them. They went to church. They did this. They have a worldview they feel safe in.
Yes.
And so to make it very cliche, it may be borderline unfair, and I'm trying to be careful, but this is a very muted version of what I kind of believe.
Same here.
You grow up in a rural area that is homogenous in race, homogenous in labor, in wealth, and or lack thereof, and so you're in a rural farming community. Most of our country, is as far as land and counties, and you kind of quieter and kind of rustic, and you grow up with the church and there's a nostalgia for that, and you don't have many people that are gay around you or black or
Look in any way different than the way you look.
right. And there's no pushback, and it's easy to grow up in those mindsets. And then when you watch the TV and you see someone who doesn't look like you, who doesn't speak your vocabulary, who's overly woke and doesn't understand, why do I have to be careful with my words? No one I've talked to is offended, or I'm not racist. Why do you care if I use this? Or, how hard is it to not be gay, or just don't have sex if you don't have an abortion? Like, and I can see, if I'm trying to be as empathetic and sympathetic and give the person as much credit as possible, how easy it is to fall into a trap of, this is just the self-building universe. And especially today with algorithms that keep us in our own echo chambers, it's easy. And this is where I think the other side is far, even almost more guilty of echo chambers and not giving any credit to people who grow up different than you. I can see where it comes from, but that's probably where my frustration early on is, the lack of academia and lack of knowledge. Like, these problems aren't new. In Islam, this happened. People don't remember. Islam was liberal with all kind. There were gay people walking freely in the streets of Islamic states until what happened? They got poor, and all of a sudden it's the liberals' fault, and we got more conservative, and that's the version you see today. That's really oversimplified. But this isn't new. These problems aren't new. This happened again, Spanish Inquisition, and this ebbs and flows, and people tend to get more conservative when things get bad. But I can see where it comes from. But I don't think it's if your true relationship with your faith isn't cultural, if it isn't, this is how we've always done it, if it isn't back in my day, if it's relational, I don't think it's that hard. And so that's where I struggle, because now I start to question the sincerity, and then we make it worse. So
Yes.
Salem, I got bored and I got into it. So I listened to 10 podcasts and read 2 books, and I watched 2 full films on it, not just The Crucible, but another one. No one knows, the records are decent, but there's a good chance one of the main people that kind of pushed it, he was getting land from it. He was killing people that were it wasn't even that hard to see, but people were in such a mindset of Puritan, of we believe witches that can send your specter somewhere else, and we killed people over it, but we do it today. So I don't know what the answer is. I do think one is probably people like me. I don't know if you've heard the state representative, James Tallarico. He speaks, again, I won't speak for you, but he'd be interesting to look at, because he is unabashedly Christian. He mentions every chance he get, and I hate to say the word Democrat. I'm not being held hostage. I'm proudly Christian. It informs my faith. It informs my politics, and I'm a Democrat, so it's okay to say that. And I think a number of people, just if for no other reason, to escape the box Christianity's been put in on the right, because that's, for people there, I'm Christian and that's not me.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're Republican, I don't care. Good it for Trump, I don't care. I judge you, but quietly. It's fine. Hey, I don't. You're not a bad person because of that. I don't agree. I don't agree with the politics, but that's not the important part. What's important is, just because I'm Christian doesn't mean I should be this. It's not a box. Christianity is relational to the Creator, relational to God and Jesus. It is how you treat others. It is how you live actual virtues. Opinion on abortion, opinion on gay marriage is not a virtue. Integrity, respect for others, honesty, humility, those are virtues. I think we can agree there, right?
Right.
And so that's what is, I think, maybe as I'm thinking, talking it through, that's what's missing. Start there and understand Christianity, because as I've thought about it, I think there's plenty of people on the quote-unquote left that are Christian. I think we're just quieter about it, because we don't want to be taken hostage. That's where I'm at.
That's good. And just reiterate what you're saying about not being left or right. That it's not about you being for or against a politician or a set of values necessarily, because there is truth to contend with and what's best for you and your family and how you vote. And if we go to a space where we are voting our values, I go back to the echo chamber that a lot of well-meaning, well-intended Christians are voting what they believe is their values. And it's something to, I can respect that. But the more challenging part is we don't have a common ground of, I used to be on the debate team. So before the beginning of a debate, you would establish what, no, you're a whole lawyer, so I'm like, right? But what the concept means for what you're about to argue, right? So if we don't even come from the same space of what it is we mean when we say affirmative action, what it is we mean when we say, right, white privilege, right? Some of these like buzzwords that are Black Lives Matters, and we get caught up in the fray of, this set of definitions means this to me, so therefore you're wrong before the conversation even starts. And that's what we've become as a country. And I believe that it's all part of the plan too. So these days are short.
My closing on the topic is my warning to people, left or right, mostly right, is you don't study history before you really think you want a quote Christian state. You don't want a religious state imposing. We are lucky to be in a place we can be whatever faith we want, and that's what allows me, allows you, allows everybody to be Christian. The minute you decided you want that law down, wait one generation or less, and it won't be Christianity or your version anymore, and you'll be terrified of the consequences. Again, I saw it here. You don't have to look far in history. That's a reality, and that's not hard to see. Freedom means someone gets to be Muslim, someone gets to be gay, someone gets to be whatever, and in my opinion, burn the flag and have abortions. But we can debate that. That's fine. But more importantly, freedom needs to be your priority if your faith is your priority. Because once you start to impose it, this is what happens. And that's not opinion.
Amen.
That's where I'm at on that. Okay.